In order to create an array, we first have to name the variable. In this case, I'll use simply array1 just to experiment. It doesn't name anything in particular. So to create an array, we'll have to use the array keyword in PHP and open the parenthesis, and then we add one or more values. For example, it can be a tree. We could have closed the array right here, so this would mean that we have an array with one item with one value. Let's create another one, array 2, and in the same way we'll use array keyword. We can say this one will have values house, door, and so on and so forth. We can define as many as we want to. Now, in order to output one of these arrays into the browser, just to see what values they contain, we can use the print r function in PHP. So for print array, and simply name the variable. And let's save this file and see what happens in the browser. Refresh. So here PHP will tell us array parenthesis. You will notice that it automatically inserted the index of 0, and the tree value is there without double quotes. So the double quotes are only for specifying array value. For example, if we remove double quotes, save and refresh, you'll notice that there's an error, undefined constant tree. In PHP, constants are defined as just regular names. So in order to fix this problem, let's, for example, add that constant value. In PHP, in order to do that, we use the const keyword. So const tree equals, let's say, oak. Now this array will use this constant from now on. Let's save the file and refresh it in the browser. Now you will see that the tree has become an oak because we define a constant value. We have to use the const keyword to define constant values. If you remove this and save, it's going to generate an error, so parsing error, because it expects the tree to already exist at this point. And let's put it back in and refresh the browser again. It's back to outputting the array's values accurately. Of course, as you may know, PHP has variables, and variables are defined as using the $sign. So let's create another tree, and let's say it's birch. And in the same exact way, we can take this tree and put it in here as one of the values. Resave and refresh the browser, and now we have a birch because we used a variable name with a $sign instead of a constant. So I'm only showing you this, that we can mix and match different values. Let's say if I add tree constant and resave it, refresh the browser, in the output now we have two trees, one at index 0 and another at index 1. We can mix and match variables, constants, and regular values as well. For example, flower. Let's save that. And now we have three values. Again, notice that the index 0, 1, 2 was inserted automatically. So this value will be at index 0, 1, and 2. These values are automatically inserted for us by PHP. What we're seeing here, and this is important for our future tutorials, is the 0 here is the key, birch is the value. And here again, 1 is the key, oak is the value, 2 is the key, flower is the value. So an array is usually a combination of a key and a value. And it's important to note that there's always a key, even if we did not specify them ourselves. And these keys are generated for us by PHP automatically. But that's not always the case. And I'm going to demonstrate you another array. I'm going to create array 3. In the same way, let's create some values. And here we can specify the key ourselves. For example, 0. I have to use equal sign in the bracket in order to associate the key with the value. So here we have 0 key, numeric key, 0. And let's say birch. Birch is the value of the 0 key here. And in the same way as before, we can add additional keys. For example, 1 could be oak, and 2 could be flower. What's interesting here is that let's actually close this array, and first let's output this array into the function and see what happens. What we have here. Refresh the browser. And there's no change because we have done exactly the same thing that we had here, except we specified the index ourselves using the equal sign in the bracket. We can also store numeric values. For example, let's create another key, 3, and let's say 152. Resave the file and refresh it in the browser. We have just entered new index 3 and its value 152. So we can mix strings and numbers in arrays when it comes to values. Now, PHP array keyword is very flexible, and you might find it surprising that PHP allows us to specify index values, our keys, out of order. For example, if I replace one index with digit 5, obviously it's out of order. It doesn't go like that. And still, let's save and refresh in the browser. You'll notice that the second entry is now 5. So it's no longer 1. And PHP allows us out of order index values for the keys. They don't have to be in the same order. Now I'm going to add something to the print code so we can get a little better picture of the values in keys. So I'm going to use the print function, and as you may know, PHP can output HTML, and so naturally a PHP document or a web page is also HTML, and you can mix them together. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to print out an HTML tag for pre-formatting, I think it stands for. And I'm going to wrap our output with these two tags. I'm going to save it and refresh in the browser, and you will see that now it's much cleaner and organized to look at it this way. Now, as you continue working with arrays in PHP, you'll notice something even more interesting when it comes to key values, and that is you can actually use a string value, not a value, but a string of text as a key. For example, the key itself can be a string, for example, a tree, and say another birch. we can just keep adding keys that are in string format. And the interesting part here to notice is that not only we can specify out of order values, we can intermix the digits and strings as keys defined using the same keyword array. Now I'm going to save this file and refresh it again in the browser, and you will see that in the result we have numbers and string key values mixed together. So my guess here is that at the end of the day, the way you think about key values as strings, not as digits, because it appears that what happens here, it seems like PHP converts them to strings anyway. And to demonstrate that, we can wrap all of our digits with double quotes, resave, and you will see that there's absolutely no difference in the output result here. For this reason, in general, usually what you do is you assign a string to the key value, and usually the value itself is a string or a digit. But at least this is more or less accurate representation of the keys, because it appears that PHP converts them into strings in the end. So of course you don't really want to fully think that all of the values are strings, but in order to demonstrate this, that there is actually a distinction sometimes between string key values and actual digits. So how do we find that out? Well, if we replace printr function with a function called var_dump, we'll get a much closer look at the actual values and their types. So replace this var_dump, refresh the browser. Now it's giving us a little more information here about each value, and it's using brackets. Here we see that 0 is a numeric value. Here actually what happened, a string value was converted into a numeric value. So even though we created it as a string, PHP processor sees this, okay, this is a digit even though it's a string, and it still thinks that it's a digit. And when it sees a tree, you will see that it actually does have double quotes in the brackets, so that means it's still a string. How PHP does this internally, it almost doesn't matter, but one thing to keep in mind is that indeed some of the values are digits and others are strings, and because of the flexibility of the array keyword, we can mix and match all kinds of different values here. And that was the point of this part of the tutorial, to show you that some of the values are strings, sometimes they're keys, but when the key is a string but it's actually a digit, PHP will convert it in the end into a digit. Otherwise, if it's like a string, tree or oak, it will keep them as strings because they cannot be converted to a digit. Now let's convert this back to printr for clarity's sake. Save and refresh. And now one really fun thing that we can do at this point with arrays is to use the for each keyword in PHP. And we can specify the array 3, which we have just created with all these different values. And now we use keyword as, and then you use named variables. For the key, you use key, or you can use any other one, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. but key is more appropriate. Then you use the same equal sign in the bracket as we used here before. And again, you name variable name for the value. It could be val 1, 2, 3, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But usually you just want to say key and value for clarity's sake. So we will open a few brackets here. And within this loop, what we're going to do, what it does is that it goes through each entry one by one, just for each. That's why it's called that way. And it will give us access to index, and we just named it key, and value. So what we can do here is print it out using this same key and value variables. So we can join them together like this, and value. At the end, you want to output some kind of a break line tag in HTML, so it drops to the next line. I'm going to save this and refresh and see what happens. As you can see, we've just done the same exact thing that print R does, but using the for each statement. The difference here is that we have control over these values. And an interesting thing here that I wanted to demonstrate is that using the for each, we can go through each key and each value and identify its type. So this is where the type of this key and value are important. Now I'm going to update this print statement a little and split it into two print statements and drop this one to the bottom. So in between here, I'm going to use PHP's isNumeric function. And let's say we here I'm actually going to add a space. Let's write something like if, let's check if the key is numeric. Numeric is a PHP function. So if the key is numeric, let's, in addition to that line above with key and value, print out that it's numeric value. Maybe even use bold text. And let's save this and refresh. I forgot to close B tag properly. Let's resave and refresh. As you can see, it is actually numeric value 0, 5, 2, and 3. So we're testing for the key. And another function we can use is string. And let's do it on the key as well, just as we did in the previous line. But here we will type, we will show string. Yeah, let's resave that and see what happens. So we have just identified that this was a numeric key. This was a string. There's a place in PHP where some of its logic intertwines. So isNumeric isn't really testing if it's a numeric or string value inside an array. It's just in general testing whether it's a number, even if it's a string. So as you learn more about PHP, you will see different concepts working in different places, and sometimes they seem to mix and match in different ways, but eventually you learn how to draw a distinction between what it really means, whether a value is a number or it's a string, because obviously isNumeric will return true even if it's a string, but it's a number on the inside. So, and this principle is at work in many different places in PHP. But with more experience, as you gain experience in PHP, you will be able to discern exactly what it does and how it treats strings and digits.